everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you already know, all in the same location for the first time, not dealing with our delay. It's going to look a little different. It might sound a little bit different, but the three amigos are here. I'm with Tyler Snyder. Tyler, what is up?
Not much, George. Just living the life at the beach. I'm excited to be with my fellow Couch GM, Cody Roadcap. I mean, you're kind of the chair GM today.
Chair GM.
We take what we can get, I guess. I mean, I wish it was an armchair. We could just put the feet up and relax, but I'll take what I can get.
Relaxing is what we're doing. We're all on vacation this week, but we still had to bring an episode for you guys. So that's why we're all together in the same place. If you hear the ocean, don't be too jealous. If you hear the birds, we think they're annoying too.
Pretty much. But we're going to hear about today, we're going to update with you all of the NFL news. I can't talk already. I'm taking the role of Cody this week. We're just going with it.
Wow, called out. Well, how about I take over your job?
Okay.
So what you can expect from today's show is all the NFL news. There's a lot happening. The first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game, is tonight. It'll be after we record this episode. We'll go through all the news, and then we're going to have a fun episode. We call it our fantasy pet peeves, but it's things that drive us crazy about fantasy and things that you shouldn't do if you're playing in fantasy. So that'll be a fun discussion. That'll be great with all of us here. I know I normally talk off first because it's the hashtag Rodgers Watch, which we said we're not going to do because he's back. But real quick, he did have a press conference since our last episode. He did pretty much air out all his drama. They reworked his contract. We're going to wait and see how it all plays out. He's most likely done with the Green Bay Packers after this year, but they didn't close the door. They did make it very difficult for them to bring him back. But after a whole season, maybe a Super Bowl championship and an MVP, it'd be hard to get rid of him. But we'll have to wait and see, but that's a long way away. But there was a lot of other news, and I'm sure just like most of you, you're tired of hearing about Aaron Rodgers. So what else do we got going on?
Absolutely. Hey, I'll take it right here. Okay. Probably the most exciting news of the offseason. Julio Jones is signing with the Tennessee Titans. Actually, he already signed. It's happened several weeks ago. But in case anybody hasn't been watching the podcast, I just wanted you to know that Julio Jones is a Titan. Very exciting news.
He does this even when we're not recording. So every day he's reminded us, if you're annoyed of it, so are we. But he's excited for a guy to play 4 games.
Especially because he is already hurt in training camp. It's nothing serious. Don't freak out, fantasy owners. But he is already hurt. Keep an eye on it. Real news for this week, as much as this one isn't exciting. Saints signed running back Devontae Freeman to a 1-year deal, just bolstering up that running back room during their training camp. We'll see if he even makes the roster, but notable name from past fantasy experiences. Figured I'd throw that one out there. More important one, Cleveland Browns signed running back Nick Chubb to a 3-year, $36 million extension. I think that's great money for somebody who's been a top 10 running back in the league. But we're going to see him and Kareem Hunt together for years. Do you guys think that that's a lot of money locked up in that running back room, or was that a good move?
I think it's a good move. I mean, right now the running back room is their team. I love Baker. I love the receivers they have, and I think that they have one of the better defenses in the league. But at the same time, when you think of the Browns and how they actually, win games, it's based off of those two running backs. It's if Nick Chubb goes down, Kareem Hunt's there to step up and take the load. If Hunt's down, Chubb can carry it himself. But if they're both healthy, they're a dangerous duo. I think there's nothing wrong with signing a guy like Nick Chubb to a 3-year deal.
And let's be honest, running backs in today's NFL, I mean, they don't get paid very much. They're undervalued. 3 years, $36 million. I believe it was $30 million guaranteed. So realistically, it's $10 million a year. It's a great value for a guy. And it's so great for a team to have 2 running backs. We added the extra game of the season. I know as fantasy owners, we're like, we hate committees, but you can't have enough healthy running backs. They'll both be utilized. The Browns lock up a nice cornerstone for their offense to keep them competitive for the next few years.
I agree with everything you said there. I mean, I think the $10 million a year kind of probably puts them mid-10, 5 to 7 in top-paid running backs. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are paid a lot more, if I'm thinking correctly.
He's probably around the top 5. I think he comes in around Aaron Jones, so I think you just still have Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook are the 2 big ones ahead of him. Mm-hmm. Christian McCaffrey's ahead of him, so probably between 5 and 7. So I think you're about right there. Okay.
So good deal there for the Browns, locking up a top running back and one of their leaders on offense. Recently traded quarterback Carson Wentz had a roadblock this week, though. He injured his foot. There was a lot going around on if he was going to decide to rehab it or take surgery. He decided to elect to have surgery. That means he's going to miss 5 to 12 weeks. That's a really big window. And then right after, Pro Bowl guard Quentin Nelson had the exact same injury, got the exact same surgery. Again, 5 to 12 week window. That's 2 key parts of that Colts offense that are now on the shelf for potentially going on half the season. What do you guys think that does to the Colts? And I'll follow that up with, where would you take Carson Wentz in fantasy drafts now with the uncertainty?
I mean, I'll start with that second question. You just don't. I mean, with him out 5 to 12 weeks, there's so many other quarterbacks that you can have as your backup. I think I'd rather have a, Justin Fields who might not step in until week 3, or, take the chance on Trevor Lawrence, or take the chance on one of the other rookies over having somebody like Carson Wentz, who you're going to have to wait for anyway. Now, granted, 5 to 12 weeks, if it is on the shorter term, if it is around 5 weeks, he could be back early in the season, in which case maybe he is worth taking a stab at. But my thing is, I don't think the Colts really have that many good receiving options on that team. Like, you have Nyheim Hines, who, even though he is a running back, he's a great receiving back. He can take a lot of catches. He can really do something with it. And you have Micah Parsons. You have people, Michael Pittman, not Michael.
I wasn't going to correct you, but I knew who you meant.
Michael Pittman. Wow. It's still early.
It's still early for us, yeah.
It's vacation. You have Michael Pittman. Like, they have some options, but they don't really have anything that's too flashy in my mind. So I don't know if Carson Wentz is going to succeed really as a whole on that team anyway.
Yeah, I know from the previous episode when we did the mock draft, George and I are a little bit higher on the Carson Wentz before the news injury. I will say, like you, I wouldn't draft him unless, like I've talked about many times, if your league has an IR spot, take him instead of the kicker your last round, throw him in your IR spot, then pick up your kicker. He could have a bounce-back season. I know before the injury, George and I were both high on Michael Pittman as a breakout candidate. I still think there's that potential for him. It might be later in the season when Wentz is fully healthy. But yeah, the Quentin Nelson one, I think he's an offensive lineman. He might actually come back a little bit quicker just because they're moving every play. But normally they can deal with ankle issues. They can deal with groin issues because they're playing within a small box. Now they still need their legs for power, but I think that's the bigger injury news because that offensive line is so good. They rely on their running backs, similar to how the Cleveland Browns are built. They're a really good defense. They go through the run game, and the pass is kind of the third option. So they'll make it work. And I know they're pretty high on Jacob Eason, who they drafted in the second round last year. So we could see a young quarterback, overtake it. And, Carson Wentz, that's why they put the injury clause in his contract about if he gets hurt and doesn't play enough, that's why it's only a second round pick. But if he plays, it's a first round pick. So the Colts are smart, at least with that one.
All right, so I see you're still looking at Michael Pittman around the same spot that he was. I think that reinforces all the other wide receivers in that, offense are out for drafting. Exactly. Do you push Jonathan Taylor down your board a little bit then with him missing the first few weeks of Quentin Nelson potentially? Or are you still sticking with he's a stud running back, you're still going to take him in the first round or early second at the latest?
Well, yes, he loses that guard, but at the same time, he's probably going to have to be relied on more. You had Carson Wentz before. You were probably going to try to let him run that passing game, but now with him out, they have somebody that they're willing to have step in, and they think is going to do an all right job, but at the same time, he's not the guy. He doesn't have the experience. You're going to have to rely on somebody who can carry the load like a Jonathan Taylor. I think that all three running backs, Marlon Mack, Jonathan Taylor, and Nyheim Hines, are all going to have an increased workload now, and we're going to see a lot less of the passing game unless it's those short little dump passes to Hines, like I said earlier. So I think all three running backs are going to be utilized more now.
Right. Interesting. I mean, I agree with that. I don't think you can fade him either, but just wanted to see what you guys thought. So,
before you move on,
okay.
I do think that the biggest hit out of the news for Quentin Nelson being injured is the Colts social media team, because I don't know if you've seen the Colts social media at all, but literally all they have to talk about on that team is Quentin Nelson. I've never seen a team brag about a guard so much in my life, but it's like there's nobody else on the team. They only ever talk about Quentin Nelson. They're like, yeah, well, we have the best guard in the league. It's like, okay. So now the social media team is completely out the window. They're going to have to start learning who the other players on the team are.
That's coming from a team who he's a fan of a team who really just worship their punter for years and years. So that's it's something about
Very
that
fun.
division.
I was going to say, it's the AFC South. They
Yeah.
have some weird quirks. But, we did talk about the Eagles trade of Carson Wentz. Eagles rookie wide receiver Devontae Smith is already hurt. I know there was some injury concerns because of his height and weight coming into the draft. Knee sprain, expect to be minor. They're going to be cautious, but it is be out 2 to 3 weeks. What are your thoughts on that, George, as the resident Eagles fan? I know it burns you inside. Are you worried long term?
I'm not worried about the injury long term because it does seem like it's going to be he'll be back around the last preseason game, maybe right after he can probably start the regular season. I think the biggest thing I'm worried about is rookie wide receiver, first full year starting quarterback. You're missing out on very valuable training camp and preseason reps now. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, he might start a little slower in the first few weeks if he's not this super elite route runner like we all hear that he is. And then it could just be another Eagles bust wide receiver for their first year. I think he's a little different than the other people that they've drafted. I've said that before. But you might not see it in weeks 1 or 2 now because he's going to have to build more of a rapport with not only this offensive scheme, but the quarterback as well. Not worried injury long term, just worried about him getting reps.
Well, especially since they're still the leading candidate for the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, so it could be even a new quarterback coming in mid-late camp. So we'll see how that one plays out.
We already know how I feel about that.
Yeah, but I did see a tweet out on Twitter that said that the talks were heating up. So take that for what you think Twitter heating up talks means. Probably means nothing, but we could see Watson on the move. I know wasn't practicing the other day in Houston, but there was some big commotion in another NFC East team's practice. Good old Joe Judge. His team erupted after and broke out into a big fight. Essentially, there was a hit on Corey Clement. Evan Ingram didn't like it. He snapped back at the defense. Logan Ryan said, nope, not on my defense. Snap back at him. Dog pile ended up on Daniel Jones. Don't know how Daniel Jones got into the middle of the dog pile, but that's how it will go.
If there's anybody that shouldn't be fighting, it's probably Daniel Jones.
All-out brawl. I know, went back to the high school days. Joe Judge made them run 100-yard sprints and then followed up by push-ups. They didn't do it hard enough, so they had to do it again. Then he sent the coaches all away so he could have a head coach-only chat with the whole team. So the Giants, tough first couple weeks in training camp. They're already fighting. Is this a sign of just a team that they've missed football? They're still hurt about how their season ended last year, or is this just Joe Judge doesn't have control of the team and this is gonna be a ongoing blunder for the rest of the season?
I mean, guys, we've played pickup football on the beach this week, and we started getting heated with each other over some dumb little plays that happen. It's football. It happens. I mean, you're talking about a sport where you are hitting each other, and now you're in practice where they're hitting their teammates. This kind of thing's going to happen. I mean, you have defensive players that are, like you said, haven't played in a long time. They're fired up. They want to start hitting people. And you have the offensive guys that are like, hey, we're trying to make it to season. Don't hit us. It's bound to happen. Judge does have to step in there and kind of restore order in the court. Huh?
Wow.
All right. But
dad jokes all around here on the Couch GMs podcast.
Hey, I'm so ready for these dad jokes. If Daniel Jones would have gotten hurt, you would have seen, like, dropping dimes. Jones hurt at practice. Like, you could have so many bad dad jokes based off of this Giants fight, but I'll leave them alone for now.
That's George's role anyways. George is the king of dad jokes, so.
Allegedly. I mean, I think mine are even worse than usual, but I don't know if that's even possible. I think the biggest thing that concerns me with the Giants fight is there was some quotes thrown around that were like, if you don't like it, just retire. We don't want you anyway. And I feel like someone on their team did retire, if I hear correctly, after that fight. Like, just got fed up and said, no, I'm done with this. So, I mean, I think we're probably past the period where, like, there's no one else that's going to, but there was a lot of emotions outside of just the fight. Like, even with the conversation with Joe Judge afterwards, everyone's like, I'm just fed up. He's not really much of a player's coach, I guess. I don't know if he was considered one before that or not.
No, well, he comes from the Bill Belichick process, coaching tree, so we know they're pretty cutthroat. They like to, my way, very military-esque. Hey, maybe they're just all mad because wide receiver converted tight end Calvin Benjamin was cut 2 days prior to the fight for his weight. So maybe they
I
didn't.
thought the point of him bulking up was to play tight end, and he gained too much or something. Like
I don't know. It's too hard to keep track of with all these tight ends, but that's pretty much the main news. There has been some other stuff going on. We've been tweeting it, retweeting it on Twitter. So be sure to check that out if you want more up-to-date news and don't just want to wait for these weekly podcasts. Snyder, I think this might be your first time with our new little segment that George introduced. It's called Quotes of the Week. George just put together a few quotes. I don't know. Did you hear the Gardner Minshew one from last week? Because that one was still one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
I do, but I can't remember it offhand. I know I'm going to know it as soon as you say it.
It was something along the lines of, I have not done a number 2 in weeks because number 2 is not an option. Trying to keep it a little bit PG here, but you get the idea.
Yeah, this week's a little bit cleaner, but George, why don't you hit us off with some of those quotes of the week?
All right, last week we talked about Randall Cobb coming back to Green Bay. He opened his first press conference with, "My people, I've missed you," and talked about how he can breathe again because he's back home. He is all sold in on this. I was not good anymore because I wasn't in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. Houston was awful, which, I mean, we've heard a lot of people say. So Randall Cobb is just happy to be back. We'll move on to Mike McCarthy with a little bit of potential fantasy news for you. Talking about Ezekiel Elliott in his press conference, he said, "We've got some younger guys who can play and produce, so it's not necessary for Zeke to run the ball 25 to 30 times a game. When you get to December, January football, you want him to be on top form and be able to run the ball 25 to 30 times if needed." Zeke is still going to be a workhorse back. There's no denying that, but you are not going to see him dominating that offense on that case. There's going to be a little bit more of a rotation. He might take drives off. Let's just hope he gets the goal line carries is what I'm thinking. I don't think this affects my thought for him. What do you think?
I don't know. I've honestly haven't been high on Zeke this year to begin with. I think that he has lost a lot of consistency over the last few seasons. He's not that same dominant, throw him in your lineup and forget him kind of player that he was when he first came into the league. And seeing the way he was last year when Dak went down was a completely different running back. I think as soon as Dak went down, his value just dropped off, and we don't know what Dak's going to be doing when he comes back. Yes, we expect him to come back, play early in the season, he'll be fine, but you don't know. He had a gruesome leg injury, and those kinds of things have a tendency to linger, or, sometimes you have some long-term effects from that. He might not be running the same way. Or even, we've seen it with players like Sam Bradford in the past. Sometimes you get those nasty injuries, and you have those psychological effects that come from it, where you're actually afraid to take a hit, and you play a different style because of what you've gone through, and you don't want to have to go through that again. So, Zeke is a little sketchy to me this year. I think that he's not very consistent. I'm personally going to avoid Zeke, especially at the value that he's going at in the first round.
That's a great point. We're seeing him right now with picks, 5 through 7 would be typically where Ezekiel Elliott's going. Maybe if you're there at 7, I wouldn't be so upset to take him. That's probably the highest I would take him. If he fell in the second round, I would definitely take him because you did bring up consistency, but he still did finish as a top 10 running back last year. So he will be able to win you some weeks. He'll have a few multi-touchdown games. But the carries is interesting because if you think back to Mike McCarthy's time as Green Bay, if we go all the way back to, even Eddie Lacy when he was dominating his rookie year in his second season in the league, McCarthy was still consistent about getting James Starks touches. When we saw Aaron Jones break out into the league, he was still consistent about getting Jamal Williams and the other running backs touches. He likes to keep his running backs fresh. Some say he does the hot hand, but he can also be very systematic about it. This is a Zeke drive. This is a Tony Pollard drive. This is a Zeke drive. This is a Tony Pollard drive. So something to keep in mind. The consistency might be another issue for Zeke. We're not saying don't draft him. If the value's right, the value's right. But look for the end of the first and definitely jump on him in the second. But I wouldn't consider him, if you're thinking in the top 4 with the McCaffrey, the Henry, the Cook, and the Kamara, if you're thinking about throwing Zeke in that thing, he's a tier below those guys.
Him and Saquon Barkley have made that 5 through 7 spot really interesting now. It's going to be a risk. It seems like anybody had taken there. I'm almost liking the 9-10 spots better if you can't get a top 4 right now.
100% agree.
Anyway, one more quote, and this one had us all talking here this week, here at the Beach House. Nick Foles, former Super Bowl MVP, when talking about a potential trade to the Indianapolis Colts to again take over for Carson Wentz, said, "The version of me right now is better than the version of me that played in the Super Bowl." Put that through your mind. Well, I mean, there's some people screaming about that one. They really feel strongly about Nick Foles, I guess.
Apparently, there's a lot of people that have some hot takes on Nick Foles, and I think he's hot garbage, personally. Did you see the way he played last year? I mean, put this through your mind. The three of us all agreed last year that Mitchell Trubisky should be the starter because he was leaps and bounds above what Nick Foles was playing at. None of us like Mitch Trubisky, but we all thought that he should be the starter. Now, in what world do you think you should just slot in after playing like hot garbage for the last 2 years and just take over as the Colts starter and just be amazing again? Yes, he had a miracle run in the playoffs, but that's all he's done. If you look at any of his regular season stats, he can't play in the regular season. He's not a good quarterback when there's no pressure on him in those big key situations. And I don't think that the team he would have around him here is going to be anything close to that Eagles team he won a Super Bowl with. I mean, they did have a lot of really good miracle players on that team as well. I mean, you can't undersell them. So, I think Nick Foles is way too in his head. I think he's getting overly confident. I think the Colts would be better off going somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't think the Colts should bring on Nick Foles. One, for Carson Wentz's sake, we talked about this. Like, he had to escape Philly because of Nick Foles to bring him in. I understand Nick Foles is probably one of the best options out there in terms of value. He's the third string on the Bears. He is a veteran. He does have a Super Bowl win. He did have the miracle season where, I think, was it 26 or 28-2 touchdowns as the Philadelphia Eagles starter. So I know we're saying a lot of bad things about Nick Foles. It's not that he isn't, a reliable backup, but that's what he should be. He should be a backup that comes in for a few games. We saw it consistency last year with the Chicago Bears. That offense would sputter a lot without the elite weapons on there that Nick Foles needed. We talk about the Colts, their weapons, it is very similar to the Bears. One, except there's no Allen Robinson. It would be all your Darnell Mooney's, Jimmy Graham's, Cordarrelle Patterson's, all those guys without an Allen Robinson. So for me, I would avoid Nick Foles at all costs. I would avoid trying to get Phillip Rivers out of retirement because I heard that he didn't rule it out. He was thinking about that. I know he's a big fan of Jim Irsay. I know there's been jokes about getting Andrew Luck back. I think he's completely done. I don't think he's coming back. And honestly, I wouldn't want to bring Andrew Luck back at this point. You just traded for Carson Wentz. Luck hasn't played for 2 seasons. You don't need that drama in there. Roll with Jacob Eason. Hope that it's closer to the 5 weeks. And that's how I would go with it. Nick Foles, you might be a little crazy, though. You had a pretty miracle run on that Super Bowl.
It's also worth noting, I think Nick Foles is just trying to get out of Chicago because
I don't blame him there.
Yeah, agreed. But he had said some things also in that press conference that were along the lines of, I love Frank Reich. He did a great job of tailoring the offense around me. I play best when that's the case. Basically saying that Matt Nagy was not changing the offense to tailor to him or to tailor whoever his quarterback is.
Well, I think we've seen that, too, from Matt Nagy.
True.
He runs his system. He runs his plays. That's how David Montgomery can be so up and down because he is very much Andy Reid. He'll run 10 pass plays to start the game and then be down by 10 points and be like, well, I can't run the ball anymore and have 7 carries. Matt Nagy is very much this is how we're going to play football. We're going to do it my way or no way. The Bears haven't been too successful, so maybe there's something to that.
It's true, but apparently Montgomery's getting 20 carries a game this year. Don't forget that.
Oh, that is true.
That was on the inaugural.
Quotes of the week. Very good.
Anyway, so we wanted to have a little bit of fun this week with all 3 of us together. We were looking at this episode a couple of weeks ago, but we're going to do it now. And we're just going to open up the floor and talk about some fantasy pet peeves. Some things that you guys have experienced in fantasy leagues or see in fantasy leagues still that just drive you absolutely mad. We'll just go around the table, have a conversation.
Need to get my list ready.
Cody's got a list. I got a list too. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Man, I didn't make a list. I was just ready to go hot takes.
Well, that's the hot take guy in you right there. Here, you know what? He's pulling up his list. Go ahead, you start. Give us something.
All right, you know what? I got to give you this one first. It is a shout out to my girlfriend, Shelby. She told me to make sure to put this one in because it's her biggest pet peeve. And you know what? I think it's a pet peeve for all of us. And that is people that auto-pick their team. Now, I understand. Life happens. Everybody sets a draft date. Something comes up. You can't make it. I get it. However, there's times where you can make it to the draft and you're like, you know what, I think I'm just going to go out and party tonight instead. Or, you know what, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to let it auto-pick instead. No. That's drafting your team is half the fun of fantasy. If you don't draft your team, then any wins you get really are discredited, in my opinion. The computer won your games. You didn't win your games. So my biggest pet peeve and her biggest pet peeve is people that don't draft their own teams.
Hey, that's a great point. I can't argue that. Like you said, there is stuff that life happens. We understand that. We're not trying to be like jerks about it if real life happens. But you agree to be in a fantasy league. You said you'd be in a fantasy league. It's 3 hours, one evening, one afternoon. If it's even 3 hours, depending on it, could be an hour and a half.
Most online drafts are an hour and a half.
So make it happen. Do that. I'll kick it off with my first one, and that is it used to be week 17. Now it's week 18. Stop playing your playoff games in week 17 or week 18. We've seen it before. You get all the way to the championship game, and then Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, they're not playing because they're already clinched. You hate to lose a playoff game because your starters are out. And I'm going to piggyback this. It's kind of a second one. Stop making championships 2 weeks long. It's 1 week. That's how you played all season long. Stop trying to say, well, let's see the 2 weeks. 1 week, make it week 17 this year, and week 18, fantasy's over. Just enjoy the last football Sunday with all 32 teams.
I'll piggyback off of that just as a reminder. Bye weeks go later this year. Definitely make your championship week 17 because you do not want bye weeks in a playoff game. That would be a pet peeve that I haven't seen yet. That would be a crazy pet peeve for me. Do not let there be bye weeks during your fantasy playoffs. But my first one, I'm going to kick it off towards my good friend Cody over there. The people that send trade offers that look absolutely ridiculous just to show interest. I would much rather you just message me or something to be like, I want this guy or this guy. What on my team could you do? Instead of just offering some low bench guy for 2 top guys and just say, oh, I'm interested in this. I don't care if you make a note. It just drives me nuts opening a trade because sometimes you don't see the note little thing at the bottom. And it looks like,
sounds like your problem.
We are targeted. We are so getting targeted right now.
It sounds like if you can't open the trade to fully read the note that's a part of the trade package says, hey, I'm interested in these people. I have no idea what you want. What's the difference? That's literally sending you a message. You literally just asked me to send you a message. I did. But you didn't read it.
It's just laid out nicer, saying, here's the guys I am interested. Let me know what you want. It's laid out real nicely.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not the only one in our league that says it. I think with a league of 10 people, you two might be the only 2 that actually do it, and it doesn't drive you nuts. So, just had to throw that out there first. Okay. Right, you make good points.
I am super targeted here. All right, well, I'll take it. The next one. And look,
you can target me too?
We already know that Cody is going to say that you shouldn't have kickers in your league. We've heard it for, pretty much since we've started this podcast, Cody's saying that you should not have kickers in your league. But if you have kickers in your league, and honestly, this goes pretty much for defenses too, stop drafting kickers in the middle rounds. What are you doing? Stop it. Kickers should not go in the middle rounds. I don't care if Justin Tucker's out there and he can kick 50-yarders better. I don't care. They're not worth middle round picks. Go get a nice receiver or a nice running back in the middle rounds that has better upside. You can pick up a kicker off free agency every single week, and it'll do just as fine as if you took Justin Tucker in the middle rounds. I mean, people were taking Harrison Butker last year in the middle rounds because they thought he was the next big thing. I don't even think he was a top 10 kicker at the end of the season.
No, he had a bad year. So last year in our league of record, Butker went, I think, in round 10 and Tucker in round 11. We have an emphasis on kickers in our league because they do lose points for misses. They get 4 points for 40-yard field goals. Normally that's still 3.
We should just get rid of them.
Cody, I know. Tyler, when would you take a kicker that's of a top tier if you want to try to get one of those top, say, 3 kickers? How long would you wait?
I think you should be taking your kicker and your defense in the last 2 rounds. If you really want to get your guy that you are so specific on then 1 round earlier than that, 3 rounds from the end. I mean,
So in our 16-round draft, 14.
yes. And if they're taken by then, who cares? Move on. Look, Justin Tucker can be your favorite kicker. Oh, well, it's fantasy. Play to win.
Well, let's not forget, last year it was Young Hoku and Jason Sanders at the top. Pretty sure both of them went undrafted.
Yep.
I believe the year before that, maybe it was Harrison Butker, but Kaimi Fairbairn, he was up there. He was drafted. The Seahawks kicker was up there, the one like 2 or 3 years ago.
Myers?
I think it was Myers. He was the top kicker, went undrafted. Again, this is why take your kicker last or don't take one at all if you have an IR spot. But I agree. If you are playing with kickers, and I know most teams are, and even defenses, we're this is a lot hinted towards kickers, but you talked about defenses. The chances that a defense repeats as the number one defense are so small. To go out there, I think like the Dolphins defense, the Washington football team defense, the Steelers defense, they're all getting drafted before the last round at this point. You never know. We saw it with the Jacksonville. They fell off a cliff. We saw it with New England. They fell off a cliff. A lot of times.
It happened with Chicago a few years ago, too.
Yeah.
Chicago.
Same thing. The number one defense often isn't the number one defense because they don't get the same amount of takeovers. It's going to be a new team. And a lot of times you're not playing those defenses every week anyway, so it's not worth the middle round picks. So that is definitely a great one. I got to look at my list here again for mine. And this is kind of going to go, I should have did this one first when we were talking about the draft. But and your trade points, inactive players. Again, you signed up to play fantasy football. Either stop leaving people in your lineups, stop that aren't on bye or injured, stop not even responding to trade offers. Again, I understand if it's a pet peeve of yours, hey, I'm not going to respond to this guy because his trade offer is so bad.
No, I can. Like, that one of my pet peeves is not responding to trades. I was going to throw that one out next. Still decline it. Don't let it just sit there. But it does affect me wanting to come back and counter you.
I got it. No, it makes sense if that's your thing, don't counter. But at least respond. Again, I know we're fantasy addicts. That's why we have a podcast about it. We look at our fantasy multiple times a day. We know it's a problem. A lot of players out there don't. They might look at it in the evening before bed, in the morning before work. So we understand it might be a day or two till you get back to your trade. But we all know you're checking your lineup on Thursday before the game start. Check your trades. They're right there. It's on the same app. We all have phones in our pockets all the time. No one wants to show their screen time to show how much they're on it. So during fantasy football season, be active, respond to trades, stop leaving players in your lineups that are hurt. Because, again, it just ruins the fantasy football experience for all the other league mates.
Yeah, another pet peeve of mine, real quick, is the homer. And I know we've all been guilty of this in the past, and it's something we had to grow out of. A homer is somebody who has their favorite team. I'm pretty sure by now you should know who our favorite teams are. Julio got signed by the Titans, in case you didn't know. The guy who just drafts all the people from his team and his team only. Guys, look. Or to piggyback off that, the guys who only or refuse to draft people from a team they don't like. Look, I hate the Colts. I hate the Texans. I hate the Ravens. But if I go out there and, Lamar Jackson's there at a good pick, I don't even like him. He's one of my least favorite players in the league. I'll take him. If it's at a good value, absolutely I'll take him. I've lived with Colts players in the past. Jonathan Taylor, I'd love to have him on my team this year. Stuff like that. Don't take too many players from your own team. Don't avoid players from teams you don't like because it's still a game. It is still a game that you're trying to win. Let your emotions when it comes to football yell at your screen. During the games, be a fan outside of fantasy, but when it comes to fantasy, just try to win. Who cares about who you have?
Agreed. That was another one right off of my list. So that was a good one.
You running out of prompts? You got a long list?
No, I got a pretty long list.
Okay, good.
Next one. I've noticed I had a lot of things about trades in this. So for leagues that have votes on trades and not either a trade committee like we do or a commissioner veto, people who veto trades that are good just because it helps a team that's better than them.
Yeah.
If it's not collusion, it should not be vetoed. I don't care what your entire way of evaluating trades is. That's the law. Even if it does end up helping somebody a little bit more than the other person, unless it's collusion, it should stand. It was somebody else's stupidity that did it.
Which, if we're being honest, you really shouldn't have a league vote for trades anyway. Come up with a trade committee, have 3 people that can vote on the trades that you trust in the league, and let them do it, because I don't think I've ever seen a trade get vetoed when it went up to league vote. And if it did, it was usually because of something stupid. Like, usually people are focusing on it, especially if it's a league vote that, like, you have to go onto the app to vote for, instead of, like, hey, vote with the commissioner kind of thing. Because people just don't check it, and then you're never going to have enough active players voting on that trade to even do something about it. So leave it up to a trade committee to begin with and get rid of all that.
No, I agree. And to the same point to George said, just because it helps another team, or that you think that you sent a better offer, or that's a player you were targeting and they didn't go with it. So definitely don't veto it. The trade committee is a great option, or heck, just let all trades go through and just let the commissioner oversee it. And the commissioner, if you trust the guy, he should be honest enough to say, okay, and then he can do his own investigation, ask around, but just let the trades go through. I'm going to pivot a little bit on scoring. I know we're talking a lot about team building, how the team is played. I'm going to go a little bit on scoring for my next pet peeve, and that is bonuses. Now, I know some people will say, well, even PPR is a bonus because you're getting a point per reception. That's not what I'm talking about. I've been in some leagues, and it drives me crazy that you get bonuses for 100 yards receiving, 100 yards catching. If you want to add a bonus, make it a point, make it half a point, max 2 points. Stop with these 10-point bonuses for 100 yards receiving. You're telling me that a receiver gets 98 yards and 5 catches. That's, 14 points? 13 points if it's full PPR. Now they get one more catch for 4 yards. They're going to be at 26 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's not worth it. Get rid of those dumb bonuses out there. Again, it's so frustrating when you're playing in leagues like that, when you have a clear shot. It overvalues the top receivers. It makes those middle round receivers not as enticing because, they're not going to get the amount of targets. I mean, heck, Tyreek Hill pretty much gets 100 yards every game. Devontae Adams, he gets 100 yards almost every game. It puts so much value on them. So if you're going to do bonuses, keep them small. But honestly, get rid of bonuses in fantasy football.
Well, piggybacking off that, if we're going to be talking about scoring, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm in a league that does it and I hate it, is inflated scoring. Don't make everything worth so many more points because, the points look cooler. Like, oh, hey, we're winning 500 to 450. Get rid of it. It's so much more confusing when you're like, all right, instead of 1 point per reception, we're going to have 2.5 points per reception. Instead of 1 point for 10 yards, we're going to do 13 points for 10. Get rid of that. Stick with your standard scoring. If there's some extra little specifics you want to do in there for a half point per rush attempt or 0.1 point per rush attempt or
a lot
your
of
PPR
points per first down or something like that.
That kind of stuff. Look, if you want it, go for it. But just get rid of the inflated scoring. Stick with standard scoring. I don't care if I'm winning 90 to 80 compared to 500 to 450. I don't care about the points being that much bigger. I just care about winning. Inflated points mean nothing.
Agreed, because it's so much harder to keep track of. It's so much easier when you're looking at it, I'm down 1.5 points. If my guy gets a catch for 6 yards, I win the game in a PPR. It makes it so much less fun if you can't follow it as easily. I agree with that 100%. I hate to go back to the draft, but I feel like I have so many I have to knock out. People that take the entire draft timer every single round. Especially
guess what I'm doing this draft.
Yep. If it pisses off George, we'll do it.
Heck, he called me out for my trades. I'm going to spend all the draft time. But go ahead. Make your case.
I mean, we had talked about hey, life happens. Sometimes it's hard for people to find a draft time that works for everybody. I know there's sometimes in our leagues that we've been in where somebody can do a draft at 7:30, but they have to leave for work by 9 o'clock. So you have that 1.5 hour window. And then there's that guy who either is trying to multitask while he's drafting or just doesn't care enough to even really look. And then all of a sudden the draft timer gets halfway done and he's like, oh, crap. I mean, then he takes the entire 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, however long the draft timer is, every single round, and it turns that 1.5 hour draft into 2 hours. Sometimes, it's going to happen a couple of rounds, because maybe you're looking at 2 people with 3 picks in front of you, those 2 go, then you have to kind of pivot. But it shouldn't happen every single round.
Look, I think we can shorten this entire show if we just say that George's biggest fantasy pet peeve is Cody. We could just say that.
Alrighty, well, thanks for watching. It's been a great episode. Yeah, I can tell that we have very different play styles, but I mean that does make fantasy fun. I'll give it to you. It is frustrating when, even though I tend to do it, and it happens more in the later rounds.
I understand that a little bit.
Honestly, if you have the first pick, you're taking CMC.
Mm-hmm.
2 seconds. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Click.
Yeah.
Second pick. If you're Snyder, you're taking Derrick Henry. If you're anyone else, you're taking Dalvin Cook. Third click. There we go. I did 2 picks in 20 seconds. We don't need the 5-minute windows. Yeah, but 5 minute. And if that's an issue, make the draft times shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah, make it a minute and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Be cutthroat about it. If it really bothers you or people are abusing the rule and you're spending way too much time drafting players, definitely do that one. But I want to see what else you got on your list that is going to attack me since that seems what you're doing.
I think I got all the attack Cody off the list,
okay.
So that's good. 2 of them on my list again that you guys said would be the homer. I was going to say kind of, though, because I do like the fact that some people will reach on players and it gives me better players in the later rounds. But I still agree. And then the 10-point bonuses for random stuff like 100 yards, I agree with that as well. That was also on my list.
Well, if your list is done, I'll finish off my mental list since I didn't make a list. I didn't know we were making lists. I thought we were just going for it, but it's all right. So my final one, and then I would just comment on yours, is bad commissioners. There's nothing more frustrating than a bad commissioner. And we're just staring over at George right now. But honestly, George is fine, usually. My biggest pet peeves with commissioners is, one, the inactive commissioner, which is the guy that there's trades going on and they don't feel like checking, or, we have leagues that the football season is right around the corner and there's a lot of stuff we got to do in the offseason because they're dynasty leagues, and yet we don't even have a draft date yet. At this point, if you're a commissioner, you should have the draft date set up. If there's any rule changes that should be voted on, you should have those in mind. You should be putting those out there. If you need to collect a buy-in for your league, you should be collecting that buy-in now. You shouldn't be waiting to the last minute. Let people plan ahead, figure out what they're doing. Don't be inactive. And the second one, and this one's so going to be targeted, not at you guys, but somebody out there, and they'll probably know who they are if they listen to this show, and that is a soft commissioner. Nothing irks me more than a soft commissioner. Okay, I get it. Injuries happen, bad things happen to your team every year. That's fine. We were in a league last year where somebody's first-round pick, we'll say Saquon Barkley, because that happens. Saquon Barkley got hurt, went down, was out for the season, and the commissioner said, I feel bad, he lost his first-round pick. To be fair, how about we just let him have first pick at James Robinson, because he was on free agency. Let's just let him have him, and then everybody else can worry about waivers later. No, that's not how the league works. It goes by a waiver system, or fab, or whatever you have, whatever your waiver system is, that's the way it goes. You don't just gift players better guys because you feel bad, because they lost somebody. That's not how fantasy works. It sucks. Look, we've all been there. We've all lost key players to our team and had our whole season go right down the tubes because we lost some of our biggest guys. And even then, I wouldn't want to be just gifted good players. That's not how it works. Fight for your guys. Start making some trades. Make some free agency pickups. Do your best, but don't be a soft commissioner.
No, I agree with that. I was going to mention the same thing. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off because you mentioned waivers. Get your waiver system, whether it is fab, whether it is pickup, get it in order. I know some leagues, once the game has played, everybody's locked. I know in our league, our bench, even if they played, they are allowed to be dropped. That way, if someone gets injured pregame on a Monday night game, we at least have someone we can drop that is on our bench. I personally think that's the best way to go. But get those people that have already played that you can pick up on Sunday out of your waivers. I know the one league I am in, it drives me crazy. It'll say, Saquon Barkley gets hurt. And you'll literally log onto the app and you'll see that somebody already picked up Wayne Gallman. And you're like, the game is happening. How are you picking up a player off waivers? It takes all the fun of it. It takes away the waiver process because everyone just gets picked up on Sunday. You have to be more active. It takes the fun out of it. So that is definitely a pet peeve of mine. That's probably not a big pet peeve because I feel like there's only one league that's ever happened to me in. But it drives me so crazy that please, if you're doing it, get that out. Like, get them in. get it in line. Either have it waiver order or fab. They both have their pros and cons, but at least figure it out. We should probably actually do an episode on the differences between fab and pros and cons, but I guess we'll have to save that for another one. But that's always a fun discussion. But yeah, seriously, I think that's all my pet peeves.
I just wanted to say one more thing off of what he said here at the end. People who give up mid-season.
That goes back to inactive players.
Yeah, back to inactive players too. I mean, even after, like, if they're all invested for the draft and everything else, and all of a sudden someone gets hurt and you're just done. No. Play spoiler, like you've said in the past. Go try to find a way. There's always ways for you to make your team better, especially early in the season with waivers, trades. You never know what you can get out of people. I mean, like we said, some people are going to win trades straight out, and it's not going to be collusion. If you get lucky enough to find that key to the, then go for it. Try to find a way to win the entire time, especially in leagues where there's 6 playoff teams out of 10 teams, which is most of the leagues that we're in. Almost every single team is still in the race until the last 2 weeks of the season. There's no point in you giving up because you lost your number 1 pick to an injury for the season that early.
Yeah. And to that same point, if you are at the bottom, don't be afraid to move players. I know it's hard. You drafted this guy in the 2nd round. Why would you trade him for a guy that was drafted in the 7th round? Well, the NFL has played out differently. If you're in the bottom, you're in the bottom for a reason. Don't be afraid to move your players. Last year, I know we've talked about it a few times, there was a big trade in our league. It involved Christian McCaffrey. Everyone in the league hated it because the guy was 1-6, and he traded me Christian McCaffrey. He came back for 1 week and got hurt again. The guy ended up winning 5 of the 6 last games. If he had to win all 6 to make the playoffs, he didn't, but he won 5 out of the 6 to finish 6-7 because he moved on from McCaffrey. My team went down because I ended up acquiring McCaffrey. I averaged 6 less points a fantasy week. I know that's a weird thing to know off the top of my head, but I'm a stat nerd when it comes to fantasy points. But for real, don't be afraid to make moves. I know I love making trades. Heck, I know at one point we had a trade limit of 20 trades, and I tried so hard to get there.
He was mad because I wouldn't trade kickers with him and then trade them back so he'd get to 20. He finished by the trade deadline at 18.
And look, okay, so we've discussed a lot of fantasy pet peeves, and we could probably go on for days about this. But I think I'll just wrap up fantasy pet peeves with this little piece of advice. One, if your commissioner sucks, you need to get a new commissioner. Don't be afraid to leave the league if your commissioner is inactive.
You want to leave the league?
But I'm not leaving the league. Even though our commissioner, we'll worry about that later. But my little piece of advice would be voice your opinion. You shouldn't have a dictator as a commissioner. It should still be a democracy. Make moves in the off season. Voice your opinions. Let the whole league vote on what they think the league should be. If you say that, we have waiver period right now and we want to go to a fab system, let that go up to a league vote. Let everybody vote on it. Let it be a democracy. Don't just let the commissioner say, no, we have to have bonuses. We have to have this kind of waiver system. We have to have... It's not just their choice. It's not just their league. It's everybody's league. So don't be afraid to voice your opinion. And if they're not willing to make changes, and if this league is filled with your fantasy pet peeves, don't be afraid to leave the league. There's plenty of fantasy leagues out there. You can even start be your own commissioner if you want to.
Well, and we also started a Facebook group, the Couch GMs football community. If you're looking for a league, if you need players to be in a league that you're trying to start up, post it in there. Be a part of it. That's what it's about, trying to find active players that want to play fantasy football or, heck, just want to talk about football because sometimes you're the only person in your family, only person in your friend group that's really into football, and you just need someone else to discuss the latest news and notes for. But, guys, this was a fun episode. It's been so great being in the same place for once. Hopefully we can do some more together during the season. I know we will be going back remotely coming up, but preseason is among us. We talked about it. But as always, thanks for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs. It's been a good one, but the beach is calling my name. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Do your thing. I've been trying to keep your spirit alive while you're gone.
Hey, guys, listen. This league and this league, wow. I've been gone for so long. It's been really getting in my head. But this podcast is so much more fun for us and so much more fun for you if you get involved. So please like us on social media, comment with us, talk some trash. Reach out to us if you need some advice, or if you just want to say, George, you do seem like a horrible commissioner, and you need to get out of there. That's fine. All of that is great. Trust me, like I said, more fun for us, more fun for you if you get involved, so please get involved.
And if you have any friends who are looking to get started in fantasy football, the how-to series is started. It's posted on our YouTube, and the links are on our Facebook page. Please go ahead, check it out. Share with your friends who you want to get started. For co-commissioner number 1 and co-commissioner number 2, I mean Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all next week.
Woo!
Nice.